Welcome back to another edition of Irish Illustrated Insider. It is Monday, August 19th. I'm Tim Priester with Tim O'Malley from Irish Illustrated, joined by John Bryce from Football Scoop. Pete Sampson from The Athletic will be joining us shortly. We want to talk about everything that happened on Saturday, at least that we're aware of, from the scrimmage interviews with Irish head coach Marcus Freeman and the two coordinators. But before we do that, I asked a question on Saturday about captains, and within 24 hours or so, Notre Dame's captains had been made. A few surprises, five in total, only one on offense, quarterback Riley Leonard, and then defensively Riley Mills, Jack Kaiser, Xavier Watts, and Benjamin Morrison. None of those names are surprises, but Riley Mills ahead of Howard Cross the third. There must be a backstory there. JB, you know what that's all about?
I don't. I'm surprised. I think we said it in our group text, and I'll say it again here. I'm completely stunned that Howard Cross wasn't elected as a captain. We do know that he's been dinged up a little bit throughout fall camp, been limited a little bit by a hamstring. So perhaps just not quite been as visible as what we've seen him be within the program in recent years. But no, that one's a surprise to me. I think some excellent captains. I think we all felt like when Riley Leonard organically put together the event down in South Alabama and brought guys down with him, both fellow quarterbacks and wide receivers, and provided lodging and food and transportation and all that for those guys. I think we had a very strong sense then that Riley Leonard would come in and be a natural leader and be one of Notre Dame's team captains.
Yeah, I never get this right completely. I think 2012 I did by default with Eifert and Manti Te'o and Cap. For some reason I miss one every single year. I don't get it. But I would have said Kaiser in terms of likelihood, Kaiser, Leonard, Cross. And then I'd have gone to Watts, Morrison, and Mills. So Mills would be the one that moves in. I felt like what JB's point with Cross, that it's strange that, I mean, a camp being not a voice would be anything different than his last 3 years. I kind of felt that way, JB, about Mitchell Evans not being a voice for a whole year while recovering. I think that almost
Right.
eliminates you from it. Yeah, I thought Cross would be it. Maybe there is a backstory. I don't know if there's a parking ticket story like Ronnie Stanley. We can find out. But there could be something. Isn't it crazy that that parking ticket thing that we didn't believe, we vocally did not believe on our podcast, was loosely true, was
Yeah,
basically true?
things have changed a lot with Notre Dame football. That being one of them, something like that. But yeah, I mean, I think we're all surprised. Howard Cross, I mean, I think is pretty universally loved within the team. I don't know why he wouldn't be. He's a little bit more, maybe a little bit more soft spoken than some guys. And I know that Riley Mills has really emerged. And
Yes.
talking to Mitchell Evans in the spring when he was still injured, it was important to him too. But you have to. Some years there don't seem to be a lot of candidates. This is one year where there were a bunch. I'm sure it's disappointing for Evans and Cross, but they have bigger fish to fry here moving forward.
They do, and I'm glad you brought that up about Mills, because just because we listed him six means nothing. Al Washington said Riley Mills, the biggest growth in Riley Mills is he can coach. Remember, they were doing a lot of dual things where they're on different sides of fields. He goes, I'll be with other defensive linemen, and Riley Mills will be coaching defensive linemen while he's participating. That was early in camp. That was probably, to JB's point, I mean, Cross was removed from some of that stuff. So maybe Mills just jumped in there. And Tim, last year we were shocked Jack Kaiser wasn't a captain. So there's often somebody, but then you think to yourself, well, you have JD Bertrand as a captain. You need Jack Kaiser too. That's the two people from a position. As I
And
said,
there's
I've never gotten it right. There's Pete Sampson, who also would have guessed Howard Cross would have been a captain as well, I think.
Oh, just yeah, no doubt. It's interesting when I sat down with Howard maybe a week before camp started, and he talked about how he's is sort of like a, I don't know, reticent might be too strong a word, but like that's just not his natural default setting in terms of like being vocal. He's tried to do more of that, but I would be, his play would indicate captaincy more than his personality,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does. And there has to be some explanation. I just said he's generally more soft spoken. Clearly, I mean, when you talk about leading by example, he's probably the best example of that. So he's a leader in his own right. But Pete, I had just said that in talking to Mitchell Evans during the spring, being named a captain was important to him. It was one of the reasons when he listed reasons to come back, and I'm sure it's not at the top of the list. The injury, of course, was the main one, but it was important to him to be named a captain. But sometimes you got to draw the line. We even had people on our message board saying 5 are too many. I don't know why 5 is too many. I don't think that it is. I think it's
The
I
odd
think
thing, Tim, is the people that think there's offense, defense, and special teams. That was weird when they did that because your special teams captain isn't necessarily a team captain. I always thought it was odd you had to do that. Charlie Weiss did that a lot. Offense, defense,
Yeah.
special teams.
Scott
That's
Smith.
not. Yeah, Scott Smith is a team captain, and you could.
Yeah.
I mean, Howard Cross is a team captain. Captain Lewis Moore. So I never agreed with the offense, defense, special teams. I know like 8 might be too many, but they could have had 7 or 8 this year.
They had what 7 is the high. That was
Yeah.
a while back. And that is a lot. I mean, I hesitate to say too many because who the hell are we or
Right.
anybody else to say what works for captainship within a team? It's none of our business, and we don't have how do we have a gauge on that? I mean, I would think that we in the media, because we do spend time around these guys, that we have a little bit better idea. But I don't think 5 is too many. I think once you start expanding upon that, that's a lot. But if you have the leadership, you have the leadership. I think. I
They
think
had 6 2 years ago. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
they've 7, I think, has been the most. But anyway, it is what it is. We move forward. Pete, we started with that. So when you joined us, we didn't see the scrimmage on Saturday, but we heard Marcus Freeman talk about it in pretty glowing terms. I have a bit of an interpretation to those glowing terms, but you guys jump in based upon what we heard from Al Golden and Mike Denbrock and, of course, Marcus Freeman.
I wanted to go quickly to the defensive line and offensive line because JB heard Spindler had a really good practice, which we hadn't heard in a while from camp. And that's great to hear because I'd love to see that there's more competition at the guard position than we thought. That was completely off the radar going into Saturday. I do wonder, though, when Howard Cross sits out and Riley Mills probably barely played and Gabriel Rubio's out, that makes your 1s Onye and Heinisch, and your 2s that the 2s shined against Mookum and somebody. It's easier to shine against Notre Dame's 2s when they're Mookum and somebody than when they're Rubio and Onye.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, I was told it sounded like the way it was described to me is when it was 1s versus 1s, the defense was clearly better. And when it was 2s versus 2s, the offense had some success. That the receivers got locked down pretty good by Gray and Morrison. Like the best catch was Logan Saldate. He's going against 2s and 3s. So yeah, I think that the scoring of the scrimmage really doesn't matter. I think that if it was just a 1s versus 1s, then the defense actually would have won the scrimmage.
That's exactly what I heard as well, Pete. JB?
Yeah, very similar. I think for me, well, one thing we all know, we've talked about it literally from the July 31 opening of camp, is that Al Golden offers no quarter. He does not do anything that's going to allow Notre Dame's offense to generate some false confidence. Like, he plays his system. He deploys it the way he thinks they need to be preparing to deploy it over the course of the season. If that means a bunch of different blitzes, literally on the first day of practice out there on LaBar practice fields, that's what they're doing. Beyond that, we heard again that Knapp and Pendleton were the left flank of the number 1 offensive line at left tackle and left guard. And I continue to be told that you see it there with those guys, but they're also being force-fed, that you can see the natural talent, but they're still trying to adjust to the collegiate game. Specifically, it was told, Knapp did some good things, still has to understand leverage a little bit more, still has to get some more of his natural power behind him and play with that power, maybe instead of coming back a little bit and not being able to fire off the ball the way that they need. So didn't hear a bunch of doom and gloom in that regard. Again, talked to somebody who's got very intimate NFL knowledge who was at the scrimmage and just said, you can absolutely see it with those guys. You can also see that they're untested and unproven.
And JB, one of your sources said Spindler. I mean, that not just me saying this. He said Spindler was mauling the twos. Is that
Yeah,
accurate? Now, I
yeah.
remember the twos could be Mookum and someone, but that's good to hear.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, Spindler had a nice day. We alluded to it on video after Saturday's press conferences were concluded. I told he had a really good day. Again, we don't know, did he have a great day going against Donovan Heinisch and Jason Onye and no reps against anybody in the upper tier of the rotation, or exactly what did that look like? But at least I think that shows you the level of engagement and determination that Rocco Spindler's still bringing.
Well, and I think that as we wait for final determination or a final word from Notre Dame announcing it, I think we can safely say Anthony Knapp is going to start against Texas A&M. And I know that, it's like, oh, you don't want to put a freshman in that situation, but if Tosh Baker isn't getting it done on the practice field, how the hell is he going to get it done in front of 111,000? So I understand that move. I would imagine that Pendleton did get the majority of the snaps with the number ones, or a significant amount, but I would also think that spot might be a little bit more open-ended, especially if Spindler did, quote, make a move on Saturday. But Coogan with his 13 starts, starting alongside a true freshman, that would seem to, on the surface, would seem to make the most sense in the setting. But if you're not getting it done on the practice field and somebody is doing it better than you,
Right.
I mean, I could understand why they would go with the complete inexperience, but I would still think that Coogan probably has, as they reach the finish line, maybe by a nose on the other two guys.
Yeah, there's just a lot of belief in the ceilings, and I think it might have even been
Yeah.
your question that elicited that response from a couple of the different coaches on Saturday TP. But I thought that was very interesting. We made the note then, when you hear coaches talking about ceilings and trying to project where things go, again, how it looks week one doesn't mean that's how it's going to look even by September 28th when Louisville comes to town.
Well, and that's pretty much exactly what Marcus Freeman said, and he said the word ceiling, and he talked about the starting lineup in week one compared to week eight, and what's best for week one might not be what's best for week eight. I think well, depending upon who you start, of course, on Saturday or a week from Saturday, what could be best for week eight almost might be better for week one as well, even though if it's a younger guy, they're speculating a little bit about that more.
And I'm curious. Oh, go ahead, Pete, if you're still on the offensive line.
Yeah, the idea that you would set your lineup for Texas A&M based on ceiling is insane to me. Like, I don't understand that at all.
But you could see the Baker reality of not being able to.
Yeah, if he's just not like, but you're not starting Knapp at A&M because his ceiling is higher than Tosh Baker.
No, I
You're starting
agree.
because
I
he's
agree.
better right now.
Right.
And
Right.
but the same thing has to be true of Pendleton and Coogan, which I'm much more skeptical of, because we've seen Coogan go out there and play well. So that the idea that you would start based on ceiling to open the season is nuts.
I think that's applicable more to the left tackle spot than the left guard spot. And again, it goes back to that's what you're saying, right, Pete? I mean,
yeah, if they start Knapp and Pendleton next to each other at A&M, I will be floored.
I agree.
I just would be shocked by that.
And I don't think anybody's necessarily saying they're starting based on a ceiling. I think they're saying, okay, if they're level now, you've had 5 years of Tosh Baker. You sort of know what the ceiling is. There's much more runway out there, is the belief for an Anthony Knapp.
I think Priester said it best. If Tosh Baker has given them any reason over the 3 weeks he was handed the job to not take the job, then he shouldn't start. That's how I look at the Anthony Knapp situation. It was, okay, you lost out. Thanks for staying. Oh, here you go. Here's the job. Okay, this isn't going very well. Why would it start going well against Texas A&M?
Yeah, it wouldn't. That's why, it was like within days after Joe Rudolph sat there and told us that he's going to be the guy, that he wasn't the guy anymore. It's almost like the very next practice or two,
yeah,
he lost the job again.
And I've said this way too much, but we're going to say it one more time for the last time in training camp. Pat Coogan had to do 10 days of playing center because if Ashton Craig gets hurt at Texas A&M with all of the silent calls and everything else they have to do at A&M, you have to have another center ready or the game ends when Ashton Craig gets hurt. You can't not function with snaps at Texas A&M.
I don't know if he got 10 practices, but
he would have gotten at least, I mean, I think he would have gotten 7 to 8 at least.
well, we don't know whether they
Well, we saw him 2 Saturdays ago at center.
Yeah.
So that would be
well,
that was the very first time he ever did it. That's 7 practices.
9 days ago. 9 days ago. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure as many reps as they can get, but you also, we talked about not, at this stage of camp, you're not wasting reps, you're moving forward with it. Whatever. You feel a lot better about what other options would you have? Joe Otting is not ready to play center, so you have to make that move. Guys, anything else from this weekend before we move on to segment 2?
I mean, I think it's relevant that Moore was in a red jersey and Mickey was withheld because you need one backup corner in 102 degrees for Christian Gray and Benjamin Morrison. So you don't want to injure Jaden Mickey or an injured true freshman Leonard Moore, who, by the way, has a higher ceiling than Jaden Mickey, we're told, if we're going with ceilings here. But you need another corner. I mean, they might ask Morrison to play 70 snaps. What if it's an 85 snap game somehow?
Yeah, Leonard has, another corner has to play. Yeah. And, I realized that Ben Morrison was throwing around superlatives for a lot of guys last week, but I said it in our video the other day, the instant analysis, every time I watch Leonard Moore, I always use the word flash. He flashes. He flashed. I mean, every time I've seen him. So
even wearing the red jersey on that Tuesday,
even wearing the red jersey where they weren't, obviously it wasn't full contact at that point, but he wasn't afraid to bump into guys a little bit. So, that's a good situation. We've got, I recognize that we've basically just talked about captains and the offensive line again. And we, believe it or not, we do have some offensive line questions in the second segment. I tried to spread them out a little bit so we can hop from topic to topic, but we'll be back with segment 2, burning up the boards.
If you're coming to a game this season, you have to check out Game Day Your Way, Notre Dame's tailgate service provider. Game Day offers everything you need, including tailgate gear, catering, and even beverage delivery right to your spot. And their Irish Express transportation from Chicago allows you to tailgate while you travel to their all-inclusive party zone in South Bend. Let Game Day deal with all the hassle so you can focus on the fun. For tailgates, tickets, transportation, and more, visit GameDayYourWay.com.
Welcome back to segment 2, burning up the boards. Our first is from Terry Benedict, and I like the way this is worded. Did Anthony Knapp win the job, or did Tosh Baker lose it?
That's an ESPN type question. I do think it's a combination of the two, and Anthony Knapp showed in the spring that, I mean, they liked him in the spring. There's no doubt about it. But I think in this instance, clearly Tosh Baker opened the door. And would they be as high on Anthony Knapp if Charles Jagaso was still healthy? We wouldn't even be talking about him. But I think it's more, certainly it's a combination, because Anthony Knapp has shown himself to be a pretty good player, is going to be a really good player. But I think in this situation, it's more Tosh Baker just not stepping to the plate.
I think if you take Joe Rudolph at his word, I think Tosh is our answer at the left tackle position. Yeah. That was basically right. 24 hours after Jagasaw got hurt. So that Tosh Baker opened the door for Anthony Knapp to win the job.
And I can't remember if it was TP or TO. I think it was a day that I was on the defensive end of the field, but one or both of you guys noticed that, like, first or second practice after the Jagasaw injury, that Tosh Baker had a false start very early in practice, and
in a skeleton drill.
Yeah, and if Knapp is not making those mistakes, and again, they love what Knapp brings to the table from a physicality standpoint, from just the way he plays the game, what he can do. That's why they force-fed him so many additional reps with the ones the last 10 days, the last 12 days.
I think Baker lost the job, but it's fair to say that Knapp also he rose above Gerby Lambert, and Sullivan Absher was moved to guard because Anthony Knapp did a better job at tackle. So those are two guys they do like.
And I would say, oh, sorry, I was just interject really quickly here to say, we've not talked about him yet this podcast till you just mentioned his name, T.O., but Derby Lambert closed camp the last 2 weeks, as well as any offensive lineman, and continues to push there. So, to the point we keep making that week one's O-line lineup is not going to be the same probably as week 4 or maybe week 6 when they come out of the bye week, that second weekend of October. I don't think Derby Lambert's going away.
I can honestly say this. I saw Gerby Lambert come off the snap of the football more aggressively and more physically than I've ever seen a Tosh Baker rep. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that that's the image I have in my head. And so if you can't dial it up, you're not going to start a left tackle for Notre Dame.
Next question is Irish Danny 777. It is well documented how effective the Irish defense could be this season, but what challenges does the A&M offense bring into week 1?
As I do during the season on Sunday nights, I started watching the next opponent, and it was kind of fun. Connor Wigman is really good, man. He's really good, and I know that he won games against New Mexico and some other teams that weren't Louisiana Monroe. You know, I understand that he didn't play against the best competition, but the dude can play, and I don't want to get too deep into that now. 12 days before the game, we'll talk about it more. But he's really good. He was a 5-star quarterback coming out of Cypress, Texas, and when they put him in as a freshman against Mississippi when he started his first game 2 years ago, he came out firing, accurate, tough, will hang in there and take a throw under pressure. Did I say accurate? Extremely accurate. And then he's got a good group of receivers he's got 3 receivers that combine for 91 catches, almost 1,300 yards and 9 touchdowns. I think their offensive line is further along than Notre Dame's. Although I don't know. Well, Trey Zune, their left tackle, is probably the best offensive tackle on Notre Dame's schedule this year. So their offensive line, they've got a center from Fa'u from Utah that started 8 games last year. They've got a guard that played at Kansas last year. So they supplemented along the offensive line in the transfer portal in ways that Notre Dame didn't. So we'll get more into that, but those guys are pretty good. They're off. They didn't run the ball well last year. I know that. That's a big emphasis, and that's what people are complaining about in College Station. But they've got some good players on offense. It'll be a challenge.
Yeah, I think Wegman can stretch the field. I think that that would be one thing Texas A&M tries to do to loosen up Notre Dame's front 7, because I think Notre Dame is really good to elite at all 3 levels of the defense. But I do get the sense that Texas A&M believes they've got some speed and want to test Notre Dame's team speed, particularly trying to stretch the field. Wegman, to your point, has been incredibly accurate. He's not played a full season, but he's played 9 games at the collegiate level, and I think has 16 touchdowns against just 2 interceptions, and can run it enough to just be to make you be aware of the fact that he can run it. He's not Riley Leonard. He's not the athlete that Riley Leonard is, but he can do enough with his legs just to not let you completely ignore that threat from him. But I think it's A&M trying to stretch Notre Dame and test its speed.
Both those
I was going to say, I would even go, I would try to stretch Notre Dame horizontally. I think back to the Louisville game in 19 when, they came out and really a lot of misdirection, east-west type stuff. Like, if Jalen Sneed's on the field, if Jaden Osbury's on the field, if Kingston, Drake, Bowen, they're on the field, I would go at them and make them read things out and play east-west. You got a quarterback who I think is talented enough and experienced enough to do it. And I'd make Al Golden try to solve that problem, during the first half.
The deep ball is not his specialty per se. I think there's evidence out there that he has a tendency to underthrow a little bit on the deep ball, but when he squares up, he's got, if you slow down his throwing motion, it's long, but in real time, it's quick. He he flattens out the football behind him, but in real time, it's really quick. When he muscles it up, he can really fire it. The deep ball comes up a little bit short sometimes. And as far as the 2 interceptions he's thrown, I actually didn't see one of the 2, but I know one of the 2, both were against Miami. The receiver slipped and fell, and that's why there was an interception. So
We
he's
should
good.
point out for people that don't know, Wegman hurt his ACL in Game 4 last year. That's why he's so inexperienced.
Foot
No,
injury.
foot injury in Game
Yeah.
4. They were 3-1. That was during the Auburn game, right?
It was during the Auburn game.
Yeah,
Yes.
and they ended up beating Auburn. So his loss was to Miami 48-33. I think it's interesting, Pete, you bring that up about the linebackers. I know this is the case for the year. I am really certain that Notre Dame is going nickel in this game, with Jordan Clark being one of their main components.
Yep.
You are Kaiser with one linebacker almost the whole game. But
Definitely.
just like Benjamin Morrison and Christian Gray, you can't ask Kaiser to play 80 snaps if there's 80 snaps either. So you have to have somebody in there at some point. He is not playing special teams in A&M. Is that a good guess for Jack Kaiser? How much they need him on the field on defense because he wants to play both? I don't think they're not going to let him do that for Game 1.
Question from Dallas Irish 83. Has there been a camp in recent memory where you as reporters had less access to actual football? If so, what role, if any, did that lack of access play in what appears to be a surprising turn of events on the offensive line starting lineup? Meaning, do you think you would have picked up on this prospect sooner if you had seen more action?
This is an offensive line question because we didn't see the 2020 spring or summer. So we did not know how good Kyron Williams was. We knew exactly how good the offensive line was because when we asked Brian Kelly one question in the summer, it was, this is an offensive line and tight end driven unit, right? And he doubled down immediately on our 12 package is our offense, much to the chagrin of other writers that were pining for the days of Jordan Johnson running freely down the seam with his incredible speed from Phil Dracovic throwing beautiful balls to him. But 2020, we saw nothing, and Kyron Williams snuck up on us, but offensive line, that line was as set as offensive lines get. You saw that line set when we gathered in February before spring practice would start. Sometimes you just got to believe what you see. Like, if you believed what you see in 2022, you knew they were going to struggle at quarterback. If you believed what you saw in 2023, you knew they were going to struggle at receiver. The only thing I'll be fair to the offensive line is here, we just haven't seen them play competitive action against the defensive line. We didn't see any. We saw no true offensive line reps with Anthony Knapp and Sam Pendleton against the defensive line.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was this is the least football we've seen in a preseason camp that I can remember. And then, Malley's point is spot on. We got one full practice, and that's when we watched Charles Chagasaw play.
And Spindler.
Yeah. So we've got nothing on it. But look, you guys have said it, I've written it. They don't waste reps for the heck of wasting reps. They're giving Knapp and Pendleton those reps for a reason. It's not just to make them feel good about themselves. It's because they think that might be the best option at Texas A&M. So you just gotta trust the fact that they're not screwing with us to such a degree that they would waste that time of practice.
Just to interject, Tim, this is maybe he was asking like in 2021 about Joe Alt if we picked up on him sooner. I mean, I think everybody liked Alt, but Blake Fisher was the 100% dead set starting left tackle. There was not even a question
was
to
talking
have
about
there.
Joe Alt.
Yeah, he was just
a
like,
tight
wow,
end.
yeah, you're like, that guy looks big. That was
He
what we
wore
said
number
about Joe Alt.
44.
He did wear 44. Yeah, well, they were grooming him for he had been made an offensive lineman, but they were grooming him for tight end reps.
He played tight end.
Yeah, he did. Right.
Yeah.
I think the question, I think we were pretty much on top of when Pendleton was playing left guard. We saw it and reported it. Again, it was Baker is, again, Joe Rudolph said Baker's our guy, and then within a few days he wasn't their guy. So I don't know that we were, behind reporting this. We were probably behind seeing some of it on the practice field, but we didn't get a lot of access. We were a little bit surprised. Well, in fact, there was a practice viewing scheduled for tomorrow that was on the original schedule. That was
five segments
canceled.
again, though. We still wouldn't see much.
Yeah, no, true. But look, we saw Pendleton playing left guard during those 5 segments too. So
that's true.
Yeah, not a lot of access, but yeah, I understand when you have a team that you think is this good, you'd like to button it up as much as you can and let the product speak for itself on August 31st.
Next question looks like we might have had a cutoff here, but it's from ND Dash.
No,
Texas
that's it.
A&M.
That's it.
That's it.
That's the
All right.
name. Yep.
I like the name. Texas A&M seems to have just as many questions about their offensive line, and at every other position except maybe linebacker, Notre Dame seems to have an edge or significant edge. How can this be consistent with ND being plus 2.5 and plus 100? Surely home field advantage cannot be the only explanation.
Well, it's not. But I mean, you're not ND underscore. You're not looking at Texas A&M the way we're looking at Texas A&M. I mean, Connor Wigman is a really good quarterback. And look, I've said before, I don't believe in jinxes, and I believe that in playing sports and coaching sports. But I do kind of believe in omens. And man, all of this praise being heaped on Riley Leonard and Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen and all these comparisons. I mean, can't you? I can feel it in my bones coming out of Kyle Field, where it's like, who was the best quarterback tonight? Connor Wigman. That absolutely can happen. That's not disparaging to Riley Leonard in any way, but to think that this is just one-sided. And I realize I did the first rate series, and sometimes when you have all these grad transfers or just transfers in general, like A&M has, it's hard to get an assessment. Hey, they lost all these guys. They have these new guys. They've got 4 new DBs that are all going to play. And they lost a second round linebacker and a third round defensive lineman. And yet their defensive line is still considered one of the 10 best in the country. Do not underestimate Texas A&M. Do not think that look, I think Notre Dame could be 0-1 and still be a great team this year. That's just this situation that Notre Dame is going into. When you watch it on TV, it looks rabid. When you're there in person, you can feel it to the bone how difficult it is to play in that kind of setting.
I would disagree with the Texas A&M seems to have just as many questions about their offensive line, because Notre Dame could start offensive line with 6 career starts spread among 5 guys.
Right.
Like that's
Trey Zune's
I've never even heard of that.
Yeah, Trey Zune's the best offensive tackle on Notre Dame's schedule. We all like Ashton Craig. We all like Billy Schrauth. They each have 3 starts.
Yeah, and the significant edge thing, I know where that comes from either. I mean, A&M has plenty of talent too.
Well, yeah, let me, if I could, Tim. 5-star defensive lineman Shamar Stewart, 5-star nose tackle Gabriel Brownlow Dindy, 5-star backup defensive tackle DJ Hicks, 5-star quarterback Connor Wigman,
Big Ten sack leader.
Big Ten sack leader, 9.5 sacks from the Bowling Green transfer out of the MAC. There's a bunch of talent there. And I know that, Jimbo Fisher screwed it all up and guys left, but guys have come in, and Mike Elko is the perfect guy to solidify everything. JB, jump in here, please.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think handicappers usually allow about 2.5 points or so for home field in college football. It can vary a little bit. I would think that Kyle Field gets even a little bit more benefit of the doubt there. But yeah, Texas A&M has recruited incredibly well. There's a belief in the depth of that roster, and to Pete's point, I don't think you can gloss over the concern about the offensive line. Again, and the crowd's going to be full-throated trying to disrupt Notre Dame's offensive line. It will still be loud when A&M has the ball, but it's not going to be doing everything in its power to try and disrupt a Notre Dame offensive line that is among the least experienced anywhere in college football this year, anywhere in major college football at that. I mean, you can look at the top 10 rankings, whether it's the coaches poll or the AP poll. There's not another team in the top 10 that has the inexperience up front that Notre Dame has. That doesn't mean that we don't all believe that Notre Dame has some really good prospects up front, but they are prospects right now. They're, for the most part, not proven. We know that this coaching staff particularly is very, very high on Ashton Craig and Billy Schrauth, and think that those 2 guys will anchor the Notre Dame offense at center and right tackle for at least the next 2 years, if not beyond. But there's still question marks beyond that. And again, there's not another team in the top 10 that has those question marks. Connor Wigman and Riley Leonard both returning from injuries. Connor Wigman gets that return at home. Riley Leonard does not.
Also, go ahead, Tim.
Well, I would remind people that, you probably don't know this, but without Connor Wigman, they lost at home by 6 to Alabama. They lost at Tennessee by 7, and they lost at Mississippi by 3 without Connor Wigman. So there's talent here, folks. There's a bunch of talent here.
Yeah, I think we were talking about 2020 there briefly. If you put Notre Dame's 2020 offensive line with this group, I would not. I would think the plus 2.5 was the dumbest line in the world, and Notre Dame would go in there and handle them immediately. But that's just not what it is. And remember, Notre Dame's offensive line of 2020 that was phenomenal all year long struggled in the first half of the first game to move the ball against Duke. It's not easy, and they were the most cohesive unit you could have walking into a season. It's just not going to be pretty on the offensive line against Texas A&M. It doesn't mean you can't score points. It just means there'll be plenty of negative plays and issues Notre Dame has to overcome in this game.
Question from Gerard: would you guys feel differently about this game with Texas A&M if Mark Stoops, the Kentucky head coach, was hired at A&M, which appeared to be the case for 24 hours before Mike Elko was hired?
Hell yeah, I'd feel a lot different, just to be honest with you. I'd feel emphatically different about this game. Mark Stoops, all time at Kentucky, is 2-28 in SEC play against SEC teams that finish with a winning record. He has done a very nice job and should be commended for the stability that he's brought to Kentucky. But he's done so beating up on the Vanderbilts, going about 500 or a little better against South Carolina, 500 or a little better against Missouri. He's had a couple of wins against Mississippi State and Auburn when those programs have been in downturns. Look, Tennessee has been wandering aimlessly through college football deserts for much of the last decade and a half. And if I'm not mistaken, Mark Stoops is 2-11 all time against Tennessee. I also am not sure he would have been quite as effective in the transfer portal as what Elko has been and the rest of that staff. Although Stoops has some really nice pieces this season at Kentucky out of the portal, most specifically quarterback Brock Vandegrift. But I'm not sure Stoops would have gone and hired Colin Klein. And we know the respect that Marcus Freeman and company have for Klein because they tried to hire him. But Elko and Klein share the same agent. There was a natural pathway to conversations there. And now Klein is in Texas State or College Station. I don't think that would be the case if Mark Stoops was Texas A&M's coach. So yes, I would feel quite a bit differently about it. And we've seen Elko with a much lesser roster than what he has now at A&M, darn near upset Notre Dame with a much better offensive line last year.
And although my first reaction to Mike Elko hiring Jay Bateman as his defensive coordinator was one of elation, it's going to be Elko's defense. Yeah, Elko is going to be dictating what they do. So unfortunately, it's not Jay Bateman at North Carolina.
At least he didn't hire Golden. That'd be worse.
That would be worse.
Yeah. So I cursed when it went from Mark Stoops to Mike Elko. That'd be my response back then.
Yeah.
I just cursed.
No, I agree. And for everybody out
Pete
there,
has brought this up before, though. I think Pete has brought this up before. The Mike Elko year 2 worry coming into Notre Dame Stadium is a real worry next year when he has developed the team more.
If you could be concerned about something in 2025 already, A&M to Notre Dame, I think is actually maybe a slightly more difficult matchup for Notre Dame than Notre Dame at A&M in 2 weeks.
Because they'll lose 7 phenomenal defensive football players.
And Elko will have,
right.
that's
and
like Elko
have...
Stoops in game 1. Like, is it, I don't know if that makes a huge difference, but year 2, I think Mike Elko is going to have Texas A&M in a very good spot.
I see just a cursory look. I see 3 seniors starting on offense for A&M. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on defense. So yeah, whereas their roster is probably mainly going to be coming back. Notre Dame's going to have some turnover there. Question from Tabs 2021. How significant will the impact of a seasoned offensive coordinator have on the team versus Marcus Freeman's first 2 seasons? Yes, I know the receiver and QB rooms are both upgraded, but curious about the impact you think the coaching alone, specifically Mike Denbrock, will have on Notre Dame.
I mean, I think it's significant, especially in these situations. I think it's absolutely significant. Then you need the players. I mean, if you had to have Sam Hartman behind this offensive line and 3 wide receivers. And that would not go very well for Mike Denbrock. If you had Sam Hartman against A&M, this offensive line, and Notre Dame's 3 wide receivers last year, he wouldn't do great either. But I think giving him the weapons is a really nice thing for game number 1.
Yeah, I think Denbrock's ability to fix and problem solve in game is paramount for this season going anywhere. And starting on August 31st, because they're going to have problems in game and he's going to have to fix them. And I have much more confidence in him doing that than Jared Parker or Tommy Rees before him.
Yeah, you can't. Well, first of all, there's got to be a great comfort zone for Marcus Freeman, knowing that he has a real veteran guy. I'm sure that, Jared Parker just wasn't very experienced, and you're going through tough times last year, and your confidence wanes a little bit that he's going to press the right button. But yeah, and look, here's another thing. You can't say, oh, okay, we needed to regroup at halftime. You got to regroup during the second quarter when
Al Golden's mantra.
Right, when it's hitting the fan, right, when it's hitting the fan, you can't wait until you can, gather together in the locker room. You've got to do it on the sideline with 111,000 people screaming. So
Golden said that to people, Tim. Golden literally says, it's not halftime adjustments. It's adjustments every series. Right. The halftime adjustments are overrated. Adjustments every single series are underrated. That's what he does.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember what the story was exactly that Denbrock was telling me, but they were up against it. I think it might have been against A&M, where they were up against it, and he had to just leave me alone, don't talk to me, and he had to just collect his thoughts to the side before his offense went back on the field. That, okay, we cannot wait till halftime to get this corrected.
Right.
I've got to correct this right now. Imagine how difficult something like that is. We all sit back and say, why didn't they do this? They should have done that. Imagine you being the guy on the field with 111 screaming at you. You've got to make that decision. It's a little bit more difficult than it is sitting in the recliner or sitting in the ninth floor of the press box.
Hey, I think if our listeners did not hear the quote, because Denbrock, this has nothing to do with his experience, just kind of funny. When he was talking about turning Jaden Daniels into a kind of an inaccurate quarterback that transferred from Arizona State in the process, and he mentioned, you guys probably don't know this, but in 2022, Jaden was really struggling at LSU in a game at LSU. He said, I want to say we threw for 90 yards, maybe 82 or 87. I don't know. It was under 100, which my boss at the time reminded me of about 100 times on the way back. So can you imagine being at A&M and having Brian Kelly ask you 1,000 times what's going to get fixed? And Mike Denbrock was probably like, give me a minute. That is what I'm now picturing, because if it was Denbrock at A&M, it was Brian Kelly, an offensive guy, probably wondering what the heck's going on.
Yeah, I was going to say, I talked to Denbrock about that instance too. It was at A&M. It was last year. The A&M staff had already been let go, and A&M came out and they just played third down defense on first and second down. And so it basically, LSU had to scrap that part of the game plan and figure out, how do we force them to play regular defense, and then solve the problem that A&M, sort of take the game on their own terms. I think LSU, they went 3 and out, scored a touchdown, then went 3 and out. Then they kind of figured it out. This was midway through the first half. But I think in the second half, they scored 4 touchdowns on 5 possessions and ran away with the game. But it was just it was an example of hit the fan, got to clean it off, get the fan restarted. And he's like, that is that. He was like, it took him half a second to think of an example of when he had to do that. And he's like, well, this is my last game and I had to do it.
Yeah. So he brought it up to both of us, Pete. Yeah. That's a great question, Tabs 2021, because that is the Mike Denbrock advantage. Question from Denver Maximus. The early attrition in the defensive backfield seemed to create concern outside of the top 4. How are you feeling now with 2 weeks to go and the unexpected rise of Leonard Moore and the continued rise of a Don Schuler? I said something about this, I think, in our video after the press conference this Saturday, Tim.
Much better because of Leonard Moore. That is huge news. They love Leonard Moore. It's not just Benjamin Morrison throwing plaudits out there. We've heard a lot about Leonard Moore. The reason we asked Benjamin Morrison about Leonard Moore is we heard so much about Leonard Moore. So that, I think, is relevant for fans. I I don't know if Carson Hobbs is ready for game number 1. They like him a lot as well. It sounds like he's really not heavily in the nickel mix, although he's still working there. And Adon Schuler makes a big deal too. I would like to see. I like to know where Rod Hurd is, though. I hope Rod Hurd is kind of part of
Yeah.
this rotation
Yeah,
too.
we're hearing
'Cause
a lot about Adon Schuler, but not Rod Hurd.
right. I'm sure he'll be on the paper depth chart. I'm be interested to see how much Rod Hurd plays against A&M.
I mean, I agree with all that. The biggest story in the secondary of training camp was Benjamin Morrison, though. So,
Oh yeah, yeah.
you know, it's like you can't be like, well, we're looking for this fourth corner. Well, how about your All-American corner? How ready is
Yeah.
he?
No.
Quite ready. So, with that in mind, I would have a hard time picking out a position group that had a better camp than the secondary. Like, does anyone even come to mind?
Yeah,
There are not really many flaws there.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, any of us in the media on Irish Illustrated wrote a piece on Benjamin Morrison and just his process of working his way through it. I'm not sure that there are that many guys that are as tough-minded and mature as he could be handling, the situation as he tried as he rehabbed one day at a time. I mean, literally just saying, okay, one day here, that's all I'm concerned with. And that's great news. And if he truly did indeed get through the scrimmage on Saturday unscathed, then you're right, Pete. That's bigger than the number 4 corner, but they are going to need a number 4 corner.
Here's the difference. Jaden Mickey, Christian Gray went out and got the job from Jaden Mickey. Jaden Mickey didn't lose it. On the offensive line, jobs were just handed over because somebody wasn't playing well. Christian Gray went out and got a good player, a quality player. He's not as good as those other guys, but he beat out Jaden Mickey, and Jaden Mickey will still be a big part of it. If you have to pick one of the two, Tosh Baker lost the job. I mean, Anthony Knapp did a good job, but we're not even.
No,
it's always both. It's always
we're talking
both.
about fifth. Yeah, we're talking about fifth year guy that was handed the starting job.
Right. It's
and
always both.
And he lost it within 72 hours.
And this one, it's not. It's also both. But Christian Gray went and got it, and that he got it from a good player. And we all had Christian Gray winning the job. I mean, Irish Illustrated. When I was writing that this summer, and he was number 11. I mean, we all voted him 10 or 11. All 5 of us were 10 and 11. It couldn't have been more uniform. But I kept thinking, holy cow! All of us have Christian Gray at Notre Dame's top 11 players. I don't think we're off.
No, I don't think we are either. And he flashed enough last year. I'll stop using that term now, but he certainly played well enough last year to warrant our confidence in him and ranking him number 10 or 11. Question from Arrow fan 624. What would you do with the offensive line going into week 1? I assume that means a starting lineup. What would you guys, how would you have them aligned? Starting from the right side.
Well,
Go ahead, Pete.
Wagner, Strouth, Craig, Coogan, Knapp.
Me too. For the same reasons we all would.
Well, me too, unless Spindler. I mean, my second choice would be if Spindler is.
I mean, that was my camp choice, but for 2 weeks, I heard he wasn't in the running for the top 2.
No,
so
I know,
can't go with
know.
one practice that we didn't see.
Yeah, no, I understand. I think, you think about Coogan on a couple different levels. Number one, he was called a leader, not only a leader, Joe Rudolph, not only a leader of the offensive line, but a leader of the team. The 13 starts, the inexperience to his left, everything really under the circumstance. Now, if you were opening with Northern Illinois at home, although Northern Illinois is a good MAC team, you might look at that a little bit differently. Like Marcus Freeman said, week 1 to week 8. Week 1 would look a lot differently if it was Northern Illinois or even Purdue. So yeah, I would agree with that. I would say Coogan, and Knapp's won the job, and so
yeah.
that's a foregone conclusion, I think, at this point. Question from VA Doc 88: Can you offer an update on who is most likely to return punts at Kyle Field, and what factors does the staff consider when choosing the punt returner in such an environment? There's really only 2 that we're aware of.
Well, yeah, and the factors they're both sophomores, so it's Faison or Greathouse. Experience would be one thing, but I mean, Faison had more punt return. Did Greathouse end up returning a punt last year? I don't think so. It was Tyrese, Salerno, and Faison. Not Matt Salerno. Yeah, Matt Salerno. I mean, I think it's Faison, but either way, Faison's had 2 punt returns in his career, right? 3.
Yeah, we haven't seen enough to know.
Right.
They chart this every day in practice. Both of them are out there doing it. It'd be one or the other. But like, just in terms of how you choose it, it's just like who did a better job in camp, who won the job.
I mean, Tyree's the punt returner last year. He muffed a punt for a touchdown against Clemson, and he lost a punt against Duke that Ramon Henderson dove on to save Notre Dame's butt at Duke, because that was a momentum changer right there in the second half too. Remember he tried to dive and catch the punt at midfield.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah,
Yeah.
And
he had a punt bounce off his face mask at Clemson. So you can't. It goes bad for seniors too. But you just got to have.
So,
guts.
okay, so you're taking into account the environment that they're going into. Does the size of the return man matter? Because then it would be Great House. Just it could take a hit a little bit better. I'm grasping here just to come up with reasons why it would be.
I mean, who caught it better?
Yeah. Who's more likely to fair catch when you're supposed to?
Well, so that's a different scenario. That's a different situation. I think they probably both catch it really, really well.
Yeah, I think so too. There's times where you can take a chance, and there's times when you're at your 12 that you should be fair catching that ball.
Who has more of a background in it? Faison didn't really return punts regularly in high school. To Great House, I'm not sure I recall.
Greathouse said as a freshman he wanted to win the punt return job in the spring.
Okay, well,
so he must have returned punts more than I like them both. Those were my 2 picks last year, and it was Tyree. So I had nothing. I was wrong.
Yeah, will definitely be one of those 2.
Actually, Pete, remember we were at school field and Faison dropped a punt, and you're like, oh, there goes his chance. It was kind of he had to be perfect to win the job as a walk-on.
Yes.
But it was true back then because he was a walk-on. But
then we didn't hear from him again till Louisville.
Yeah, that's good timing.
That will not happen this year. Speaking of Louisville, do you see you're familiar with
your guy,
Colin Lacey? The injury to their
he is your guy.
Great wide receiver. Broke his collarbone, out 6 to 8 weeks. I know that
Back just in time for the Notre Dame game.
I know that's right on the border of playing Notre Dame, but I doubt very much whether he'll be ready for Game 5 against Notre Dame. But that dude's really, really good. If anything, this Notre Dame, they probably don't play Louisville next year, do they? I don't think they're on the schedule.
No.
Yeah. All right, we're going to wrap up with 2 questions. There's a little bit of offensive line in this one too. Okay, from CR Lewis 80, does the potential of Knapp and Pendleton starting against Texas A&M change your win-loss outcome for the season? And then NYC Leprechaun, have your expectations changed from before training camp to now as to where this team can go this season? Are you stock up or stock down?
The offensive line, if I had to choose stock up or stock down between the 2, would be stock down for the team, but like a game. I probably would just hold. I didn't think Notre Dame was going to go undefeated when camp started. I still don't. But you can't go stock up from camp. You can't go stock up from camp.
Well, you can with everything other. You can with everything other than the offensive line or the left side of the. I understand.
No, you can't. I don't think you can. You lost. Your cross has been limited. His backup is out, and the offensive line left side has 0 career starts. One guy's never played before. Like those are important positions. You cannot go up.
No, I'm sort of a hold for the season, but I think that it's more likely than not that they will lose at Texas A&M.
Yeah, we always say this every year. I say it every year. I don't like to watch snippets of preseason practice and then say, "Oh, I've changed my mind about the entire season." I will stick to a line that I've been using recently, and that is, I think Notre Dame can still be a very good to great team this year and start out 0-1.
It's just such an awful It's so much different in year. It's so much different in year 3 for Marcus Freeman to go 0-1 with the 19-8 record and all this stuff. This would not even be if he lost game number 1 to Texas A&M in year number 1. I'd be like, all right, let's roll. We got a great team here. Let's try to win the next 10 or 11 games. That wouldn't matter. It's such a huge game. I mean, it's like Michigan 18. It's still like Michigan 18 because Kelly hadn't completely built back up trust the way he ended 17. So it's a lot like that. It's not apples to apples. if they find a way to win this, they're going to have a fantastic season. If they find a way to win this game, I would not be surprised if they just keep winning.
No, I wouldn't either.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I also don't think that this team is going to be, there's too much leadership in there. It's too good of a team for them to suddenly, lose their confidence through going through the rest of the regular season.
It's just hard not to stub your toe. Every time you lose game one, you're like, well, they could go undefeated the rest of the way, and it just never happens. Game one or game two, or over the years they lose game one or game two, like Georgia's game two. Even that team, when you guaranteed the bounce back, Tim, that they would win their next four or whatever, they bounced back. They were great. They were the third ranked team in the country, and it was a total faceplant after that, with Mike Elko as your defensive coordinator and Brian Kelly as your head coach. That was a quality veteran team. The next year they made the playoffs. It is so hard to lose game one or two and run the table.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure. And it's like, I don't know what the dynamics of this year are going to be, just different from every other season, because the postseason is different from any other season. So what impact that has, I don't know. And it's like, look, if they lose game one, we are still talking about a team that was blown out of Louisville last year, that could not do anything at Clemson, had 10 men on the field against Ohio State, Marshall, Stanford. Like, we're not that far away from that. Like, how long did it take for Brian Kelly after 2016 before you felt confident that they were going to win every game that they
That's what
win?
I was saying. I did not feel that when they lost to Georgia in 17. You're like, oh boy, here we go.
It took a few years. But if they win at Texas A&M, then you're like, hey, 12-0.
I don't think that's weird either. I think if they win at Texas A&M, all right. If they beat Texas A&M and Riley Leonard's healthy all year and all that, they're going to go 12-0.
But if they lose at Texas A&M,
they're going to stumble again, and they're going to stumble again, and they're going to lose more than
because they lost at Texas A&M.
It's because of the pressure. Of the pressure that is involved in a college football season. So yeah, I guess because they lost A&M, because they're 19-9.
Yeah, no, that's
fair. What's that? They've lost two of their last four games. Then Clemson.
They need to win a game where it feels like they're getting ahead of the curve.
Yes,
like that. I don't think that Marcus Freeman has had I'm ahead of the curve win yet in 2 years.
And
like, he's had some good wins.
Right. If they lose to A&M, they won't be able to, quote, get ahead of the curve until Florida State, probably.
Right. Yeah, it's part of the schedule thing.
Yeah. I mean that's sort of like, was it Michigan in 19, or just when you're kind of out of sight, out of mind for a while.
Yeah.
Right.
And it may be 2 months you're out of sight, out of mind. So that's a tough situation as well.
I will say, with the configuration of the left side of the offensive line, whereas I felt comfortable in saying 11-2, you're a little bit
11-1.
You mean 11-1?
I'm sorry, 11-1.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit more likely that they go 10-2. But again, this is a really, really, really good team, and unfortunately, the left tackle and left guard are really, really important too, and that makes it.
And the right tackle's never started.
Yeah, kind of just like Emil Wagner will be
fine.
fine.
Emil Wagner's an All-American all of a sudden here.
I know. I have started to take him for granted because I like what I've seen in practice, and I think that he'll be fine. And there will be some learning experiences here along the way. But he's in his third year in a program. He's a good player. He's a strong player, and I think that he'll do just fine. But
hopefully it's like against Northern Illinois and Miami, where you're like, man, Wagner really he seemed to hit a wall there. And then they won by 21 points. That's fine. It's different than game one.
All right, we're going to wrap it up there. Thanks for joining us, everybody. JB will be back on Thursday. Until Thursday, August 22nd. I'm Tim Priester, Tim O'Malley from Irish Illustrated, Pete Sampson from The Athletic, and this has been Irish Illustrated Insider.